We had gotten to this part about Alexander the Great, correct? Yeah. Huh? Okay. Uh-oh. All right. So we looked at this though, right? Okay. All right. So we're starting here. We're starting where we need to. So, ladies and gentlemen, when Alexander the Great conquered, okay, all of this territory and then Persia and a little bit of India, okay, what he caused to happen was cultural diffusion. Greek ways, Greek learning, Greek culture was transferred to Egypt, to Persia, to India. Thank you. Uh, and so today you can actually go to Afghanistan and find. Hold on one second. Not here.
All right.
Okay. Uh, you can find Greek sculpture, and you'll think, oh, this must be like a picture from Greece, from Athens, and then you find out, oh no, this picture is actually from Afghanistan. Why? Because Alexander the Great, he conquered that area, and when he did, then Greek artists took that style into Afghanistan, and it was used there for a while. Okay, now this creates a whole new culture. It's called Hellenistic culture. It's a blend of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and some Indian. Think of it as Tex-Mex if you want to. Okay. All right. He creates a whole new culture by conquering these areas and connecting these peoples. Now, the heart of this new culture was right here in Alexandria, Egypt. You can forget about those other Alexandrias he built, in Asia. The one he built here in Egypt was kind of like the headquarters, okay, of this new culture. Center, hub, okay, like the main place. Bless you. Now, Alexander had no intention of doing this, by the way. As a matter of fact, he didn't even know that he'd done it because he died so early on. Okay, um, his intention was simply to create a massive empire, but he creates that empire. He dies, but then the connections created between these different cultures outlasted him and led to this new culture. I don't want you to think it was done on purpose. It was just simply a byproduct, a consequence. Alexander the Great was from Macedonia up here. Okay, he was not actually Greek. He was Macedonian. They were like cousins to the Greeks. His father had conquered the Greeks while the Greeks were fighting amongst themselves, and his father conquered them, King Philip. And then I think I told you on Friday what happened to King Philip. Yeah, his wife had him killed so her son Alexander could assume the throne. Okay, and then it was Alexander who took the Greeks. Okay, to conquer Persia because the Greeks had been fighting Persia forever. Okay, long rivals with each other. Okay, moving on here. Okay, so some ideas and things that came out of Hellenistic culture. One was called Stoicism. Stoicism is an ideology, and it's an ideology that teaches people to control their emotions, especially their negative emotions. So if somebody insults you, you don't insult them right back. You don't take your fist and put it in their cheek. Okay? You hold it in. If you were to see Usually, you see the word stoic used to refer to somebody's expression in some kind of a highly charged environment, like say a funeral, like say a man's mother has just passed away, and you see him there, and you know he was close to his mother, but instead of outwardly crying and sobbing and showing his sadness, he is kind of stone faced. He's expressionless. Okay, he's not happy. He's definitely not happy. But he's holding that emotion in. You know that it's there, but he's controlling it. Okay? He's not letting it get the better of him. Okay, that would be an example of stoicism right there. Okay, now it also is over. It's also controlling your positive emotions too. I mean, somebody who's stoic is not going to be somebody who's extremely celebratory all the time, and just crazy, happy about stuff. But they might be on the inside, if they're not showing it. But it's especially aimed at controlling negative emotions. I'm just curious. There's something else that we've already talked about in this class that stoicism is similar to. Yes, Buddhism. Yes, good. And there is some speculation, conjecture. We probably will never know, but because of the areas of the world, again, Hellenistic culture. Okay, Alexander the Great conquers Afghanistan and what is modern day Pakistan, and so Buddhism was already there. And so, is it possible, okay, that Buddhist ideas possibly percolated back over here? There's a little cross pollination. It's possible. We don't know. Okay, go ahead. So these Hellenistic scholars, these thinkers, philosophers there in Alexandria, they took Greek knowledge, Egyptian knowledge, Babylonian knowledge, and continued working with it, developing it. And here are some things that you probably have heard of before. For example, Pythagoras. What did he develop? Yeah, my sophomores always know that one. Okay. Euclid, Archimedes. I believe it was Archimedes who supposedly said something along the lines of, "Give me a lever large enough and I can move the world." I think that was him. Okay, uh, uh, he was all about physics and stuff like that. This guy here, he did something I think is incredible. You should look up his story. We don't have time to get into all of it, but his name is Eratosthenes. That's how you pronounce that. Okay, I know it's pretty long, but it's pronounced Eratosthenes. He correctly calculated the circumference of the earth. So he knew, not only did he know the earth was round, he knew the rough size of the earth too. And the way he did it was, again, you should look this up. I don't have time to get into, I don't remember all the details, but he had someone, he paid people to plant stakes in the ground from Alexandria down the Nile. Now I forgot exactly how far they went. Okay. But they went a long ways. Okay, with these stakes, and these stakes were equal distance apart. Every so many feet or whatever it was, they put a stake in the ground, and then they were tracking the shadows that the sun caused from these stakes at a certain time of the day, and they could figure out the circumference of the earth. It's really interesting if you want to dig into it. You can find YouTube videos on it. Okay, so another thing about Alexandria was it was a center for medical knowledge. Even once the Romans take over the entire Mediterranean, they've conquered the Greeks, they've conquered the Egyptians. If you wanted to study medicine, Alexandria was the place to go, even once it was under Roman control. So it's kind of like it was the Oxford of its day.
Wait, wasn't it like somewhere in like India or something where they had like medical?
Oh, sure, yeah, but a lot.
I thought they started it all.
But a lot of that medical knowledge came over, and so as far as like in the Mediterranean world, where do you go to get trained? It was Alexandria. And but you're not wrong. Yeah, yes, India had come up with a lot of medical techniques, but because of Alexander the Great, some of those teachings had come over to Alexandria.
Oh.
All right. So look at this map and notice that it's in 14 AD or 14 CE. So we're actually right at the point where Rome has become an empire. Okay? It's no longer the Roman Republic. They've already been through Julius Caesar, and now Augustus Caesar, the first emperor of Rome, is in charge. Uh, so when you look at this map, what were the Romans known for? What? Roads, exactly. There's a saying. I'm just curious. Has anybody ever heard of it before? All roads, what? All, and you know what? Look at it. I mean, you can start right here, and you can follow this road all the way around. Now, right here, you have to take a little ferry across the Dardanelles Strait, but then you pick up the road again, and you can make your way all the way to Rome. So, I mean, all the way around the Mediterranean. Now, I'm curious. Oh, by the way, the Romans. Some of you probably already know this. Their roads, some of their roads are still existing today. Okay. Think about like the roads around here. I mean, we're constantly having to repair roads and so forth. So the Roman engineers, they were fantastic engineers. They built roads to last. Now, does anybody know what the purpose? What was the main purpose? Like, why did they build the roads? Okay, good. It was for their military. Okay, the Romans had the legionnaires, and they marched wherever they were going, and so swamps and things like that would slow them down. But by building roads, you can get it to where your armies marching on foot can get there faster. Okay, and that's kind of an old adage in the military. Whoever gets there first with the most usually wins. Okay, and so these Roman roads were built for the military. However, who do you think is going to use the roads besides the military? Merchants and another M word. Missionaries. Very good. Okay. Those missionaries, what do you think those missionaries will be spreading in this part of the world? Christianity. Very good. Okay. Now, by the way, we have something right here in this country that is very similar to these Roman roads. The interstate system. Okay. Next year in U.S. history, you're going to learn this if you didn't already know. It sounds like some few of you do already know this. But our interstates were initially built by President Eisenhower in the 1950s. It was part of the Cold War, and they built the east-west interstates first. Okay. And that's because they wanted to be able to move troops and equipment very quickly from the East Coast to the West Coast and vice versa in case something did happen with the Soviet Union. Okay. Now, today, okay, you don't see a whole lot of military equipment being moved. Now, sometimes you will see a convoy occasionally. Okay. But for the most part, no, the military is not using our interstates. Okay. Who's using our interstates? Yeah, civilians, exactly. And if you notice, there's a lot of 18-wheelers. Okay, a lot of truckers use it. So trade, for example, okay, that's key right there. So, okay, moving on here. Now, I told the earlier class period this was going to be a hard question. Somebody nailed it right away. So maybe it's not so hard. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you the same hint that I gave them before they got the answer. Sometimes you can't see some people can't see the forest for the trees, which it's an old saying, which means you get too hung up on the details. You look at the small stuff and you don't see the big picture. Okay. The question: what challenges did the Roman Empire face, as shown by the map above? You might need to zoom out to kind of see the answer. Morgan?
Surrounded by water.
No, they're not. No, the Roman Empire surrounds the Mediterranean Sea. The Roman Empire is not surrounded by water.
Surrounded by a different territory.
No, that's not it.
Weather.
It's not the weather.
It's huge.
What?
It's huge.
It's too big. That's right. It's too big. Okay. It got too big. Think about it. Did they have any kind of instant communication back then?
No.
No. Okay. So I mean, look at this. Hey, do y'all remember what structure was built right there?
Oh, is that one wall, right, or no?
Hadrian's Wall. Good. Hadrian's Wall was built right there. So can you imagine? The Picts, the barbarians from Scotland are crossing crossing Hadrian's Wall, and they're invading, and they need backup, and so they have to send word to the emperor in Rome for help. I mean, think about that. What they'd have to do, it's all going to be on horseback at best. Okay, cross the English Channel, and then if you try to go over land, is it just a flat road all the way to Rome? Do y'all remember what's right in here?
Mountains.
What mountain? What mountains? The Alps. Okay, you got to cross the Alps. Not the easiest thing to do in the world. Or you could take a boat, okay, and go down the Atlantic coast right here through the Strait of Gibraltar and then around. But whatever, it's going to take a while. And don't forget, while something may be hitting the fan up here, other stuff may be hitting the fan down here, okay? And so it's just too much to deal with. So here is their solution. What was their solution? They actually cut their empire in half, and they made two empires. You've got the Eastern Roman Empire with its capital. Where's that? What is that? Named after who? Good, right? It's right. And does anybody know what city is there today? Good, okay. And then over here, you've got Rome itself. So this is your original Roman Empire. That's your Eastern Roman Empire. Now, what do we know this empire as? The Byzantines. Good. But now, if you were to go back in time and talk to somebody in here and say, hey, you're the Byzantines, and they would say, hey, what are you talking about? Because they would not refer to themselves as Byzantine. Do you might know what they would call themselves? Roman. That's exactly right. Okay. Although they would be speaking Greek probably. Okay. In this part of the Mediterranean, Greek will be the dominant language. Okay. Over here, the dominant language is going to be Latin, but they still would have called themselves Roman. They would have been insulted for you to think that they're not Roman. Okay. Now, so this was done for efficiency. This side of the Roman Empire actually is going to have an advantage, though, okay, because they're much closer to Asia. Actually, they're in Asia, and so that means, hey, what was the road that ends right here? Good. So they're closer to the Silk Road. They're at one end of it, and then also closer to India. So this area right here is going to be a trade hub. So this government right here will have access to more taxes, more wealth. This government over here will not have access to all that wealth. And so when it comes time to defend against barbarians, they don't have the money to pay for soldiers and weapons that this one does over here. So eventually this one's going to collapse, but this one will continue up until 1492. I'm sorry, no, 1456, excuse me. Okay. All right, moving on here. Details on demography, details on populations. So these empires practiced expansion, population expansion. They actually moved people around to promote this. In Han China, they had two goals. They wanted to promote a common culture, meaning Mandarin as a language, and they wanted to open up more farmland. So as China conquered more land in the south, they would take Mandarin-speaking people from the north. They would take entire villages and just transplant a northern village to southern China, and that would spread the language and also develop more farming to feed the people. Kind of like if you've ever helped your parents plant grass. You take these plugs of grass, these square, cuttings of grass, and you put them out in the yard, and then eventually it all kind of grows together. That's kind of what the Chinese were doing. Now the Romans, they do this, but to a lesser extent. The Romans were more focused on soldiers, moving their legionnaires up into like Hadrian's Wall and what we call northern France or Gaul, to kind of guard the borders up there. And then they would often, those Roman soldiers would often marry local girls, and they would spread the culture that way. But they weren't trying to spread culture the way China was, though. Yes.
Didn't the Tang Empire kind of do that?
Yes. Yeah, they continue that. Yeah. Okay. Now, we've talked about this too. As these different regions, South Asia, East Asia, the Mediterranean world, as these 8 different regions come closer together through trade and connections, you're going to see more diseases spreading from one to the other. And as I've said before, we think that India was the source of a lot of these things. And that's going to help weaken these empires at the end of the period. Yes, sir. Keep in mind, there's not one single reason why these empires fall. It's a multitude of reasons. Barbarians, disease, population decline, Political corruption. All right. So some cultural stuff here. Okay, so intellectual expressions. We've talked about this one before. Iron technology is going to be key in this time period. Mathematics. We've not said a lot about this. The numbers that we use today were developed in India. Then the Arabs, who were trading with South Asia, adopted that numbering system and then spread it over to Europe. The Gupta Empire also came up with the concept of zero. I don't have everything they came up with here. They also came up with infinity and also pi as well. Those were all mathematical innovations that they came up with. Hey, what numbering system was in use in the Mediterranean before Arabic numbers was introduced? Roman numerals, good. Yeah. Can you imagine doing your math problems using Roman numerals every single time? And on top of that, there was no zero either. Okay. Now we can throw a zero in there, but they didn't have that. Okay. Now here's a cool thing. The Mayans over here in the Americas, in the Mexico region, Mesoamerica, they came up with the concept of zero completely on their own. This is an example of independent invention. Nobody from India got in a boat and came over here and told the Mayans about the concept of zero, or vice versa. Some of you probably already know the Mayans were extremely good at making calendars because you might know what did they study very closely? The stars. Good, exactly. Good. Okay, the Romans, okay, as we saw on that map, they were fantastic engineers. They were the best engineers of their day. Not only did they build roads, but they also built aqueducts. You know that word aqueduct has to do with what? Water. Good. Okay. And that word duct there at the end, what does that mean? What's that right there? It's a vent. It's also called an air duct. Good. So a duct carries things. It's like a chute or a conduit. Vocabulary, students, for test next week. Okay. All right. We'll look at one here in a minute. Greek architecture was copied by the Romans, and then here, if you're interested in engineering and ancient history, go look up Romans and concrete. They didn't just invent concrete; they invented a special type of concrete. It had to do with, I believe, the volcanic ash that they mixed into the mixture, and what it allowed them to do was it allowed them to pour concrete molds in the water. For example, you're going to build a dock, okay? Instead of having like wooden stilts or legs supports in the water, which eventually will rot, Okay, they were able to pour concrete in the water and it would set. Okay, it would get hard in the water because of this kind of concrete that they used, and it would last a lot longer too, as well. So it's pretty cool if you're interested in that kind of stuff. All right, China. Yes, China is going to be the place for most inventions, including paper. Now, you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole if you look up paper because there's different ways it can be made. The paper that you guys are writing on right now, does anybody know what the key ingredient is?
Tree.
Yeah, wood. Exactly. Good. Okay. Now, but in China, it wasn't. Okay. It was fibers. Okay, like silk fibers, cotton fibers. They often use that. But as the secret of paper making traveled from the east through Central Asia, through the Arab world, and eventually to Europe, they figured out you could kind of use what you had at hand. And in Europe, Europe was covered in forest. Okay? They had plenty of wood. So they were able to use wood fiber, okay, to do the same thing that they had been using, plant fibers to do over there in China. Now, this last little bit right here, it says China's government was focused on practical science, okay, that could aid production. So the Greeks, by contrast, the Greeks were very much into science, okay, but they were more into abstract science, like things that don't really affect us in our daily lives. The Greeks were interested in things like what's the smallest particle, like an atom, okay, what makes up an atom, okay. They were interested in the stars, okay. Whereas the Chinese were more interested in things that could actually make our lives, easier on a day-to-day basis. So they were more practical in that sense. Okay, and also the government of China often sponsored a lot of this research too. Okay, okay, moving on here. So what is this thing? It is an aqueduct. Good, and it's a Roman aqueduct in particular. The Aztecs built them too, but they didn't look like this. And of course, the Byzantines had them, being Roman themselves. But this is a Roman arch. You can see all these little arches up here. That's a particular. Not all arches are the same. For example, the Islamic arch looks a little bit different than this. You can kind of tell the style by looking at the arches sometimes. Now, you don't always. Now, this is like the classical picture of an aqueduct. But the only reason why you see this is because of where it is. You're in a low place. Okay. If this were to come down, because you see the water's up here, the water's up there. If this were to come down, would it go back up this way? No. So they have to build this bridge-looking thing to keep it elevated so the water keeps running slowly. And again, if you look this stuff up, the Romans were masters at creating these things that had just the tiniest slope to them. It was like perfectly sloped. It looks like it's perfectly flat, but it's not. It still slopes. The water will run down. Hey, what do you think happens when this thing gets to a hill? They what? Yeah, they got to punch through it. So sometimes you don't even see an aqueduct. Okay. All right. What's this thing? Good. What was the purpose of it? Keeping those nomads from Central Asia, like the Huns and the Mongols, out. Okay, good. Do you remember what government started this thing? No. The Qin started it. The Qin started it. However, the way it looks today was responsible for the Ming Dynasty, made it look like this. Okay. What are these things? Good. Okay. Guys, we're not done yet. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, trade. What are your main trade routes of this time period? Silk Roads, Mediterranean, Indian Ocean. Very good. Good. You nailed them all. You got them all. Okay, good. So you're in period 2, water travel is going to start to become a little bit more common than it used to be. Land travel is still super important, okay, like Silk Roads. But because of increasing technology, they're starting to use the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean a bit more than they used to use it. Okay. All right. And empires see advantage in connecting the different regions, because if you've got a big empire, chances are resources are spread around. Okay. Now we'll pick up here tomorrow. Okay. No, you did. I